So it appears that it's over, guys. It appears that the deep state has produced the evidence to prove that the Russian government, in collusion with President Donald Trump and his presidential campaign, orchestrated a sophisticated scheme to prevent Hillary Clinton from winning the 2016 American presidential election. Today, Special Investigator Robert Mueller indicted 12 Russians connected to Russian military intelligence, GSU, who are said to have orchestrated the email hacking and subsequent release of emails to WikiLeaks, which ultimately cost Hillary Clinton the presidential election and led to Donald Trump becoming the 45th president of the United States of America. And at this point, I don't know how anyone with a straight face could say that Russia and the Trump campaign didn't collude to rig the American election. I mean, let's look back at how we got to this point. I remember during the presidential election when James Clapper, the head of national intelligence, released a statement in which he informed us that 17 different intelligence agencies had come to the conclusion that Russia hacked the DNC servers and released the DNC leak emails to WikiLeaks. Well, actually, if you think about it, a few months later, then FBI Director James Comey was called to testify in front of Congress. And when he was put under oath, he testified that no United States of America intelligence agency was ever granted access to the DNC email servers. That the DNC wouldn't let the FBI, wouldn't let the CIA, wouldn't let the NSA get access to their servers. That a private firm, CrowdStrike, that had received $100 million from Google was the only one to actually get access to the DNC servers. And then later, James Clapper himself, the man behind the original release of the statement that 17 agencies came to the conclusion that Russia hacked the DNC servers. Well, James Clapper himself admitted under oath when he was called in front of Congress that no intelligence agency actually ever got access to the DNC servers. So I guess that was just smoke and mirrors. But of course, at the time, when the news was originally released during the election, that there was this 17 agency consensus, well, how is one to combat that? That was, I guess that was some pretty powerful propaganda. And then I remember a few months ago, we found out that Russians had been organizing these troll farms in which there were all these Russian bots organized by Russian computer services who were spreading information online and weaponizing these bots to prevent Hillary Clinton from becoming president. And luckily, Robert Mueller, private investigator, he caught wind to this, and he actually indicted the 13 Russians that were behind this troll scheme. And of course, they were in Russia, so they weren't ever going to come to court. Why would they risk being arrested? Well, as it turns out, actually, the Russians who were accused of being behind this scheme, they called the bluff of Robert Mueller and they showed up to court in the United States of America. And when they showed up to court, Robert Mueller was completely off guard. He caught off guard. He expected that they would never see their day in court. And he asked the judge for a delay, saying that he didn't actually have evidence. know. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? And as it turns out, this troll farm, they actually spent a lot of time propping up groups like Black Lives Matter, propping up Bernie Sanders, and there was actually very little pro-Trump propaganda, allegedly, in what the troll farm was doing. But propaganda is the word, right? Because at the time when we heard the news that 13 Russians were indicted, that they were running this troll farm to prevent Hillary Clinton from becoming president, well, that's some pretty powerful propaganda. I mean, how are you supposed to combat that? You have the 17 intelligence agencies. Oh wait, that was just made up, right? And then you had the 13 Russians running the troll farm. What? Mueller didn't actually have evidence? I thought you were supposed to have evidence before you indict someone. That's interesting. That's interesting. But what about General Flynn, Michael Flynn? Because Michael Flynn lied to the FBI when he was questioned regarding the Mueller probe, the Russia investigation. Right? Well, as it turns out, Michael Flynn was interviewed by Peter Strzok, the now known corrupt FBI agent who, in his private text messages, wrote, "Don't worry if Donald Trump becomes president. There was an insurance plan to make sure that his presidency would be shortened." What kind of insurance plan are we talking about? Like, Russian collusion? That's interesting. It's interesting that we would take the word over a known corrupt liar like Peter Strzok over a 3-star American general. But what about Paul Manafort? Because Paul Manafort was Trump's campaign chairman, and he's under indictment as part of the Russia probe, right? Well, kind of. Paul Manafort is being charged with money laundering from a decade ago, not through Russia, but money laundering in the Ukraine. That's not Russia, and that doesn't have anything to do with, well, Trump or Russia. But there is Flynn. No. What about the 13 Russians running the troll farm? What about the 17 intelligence agencies? All right, well, either way, arresting Paul Manafort, indicting Michael Flynn, that's powerful propaganda. They were very close to Trump, right? It's hard to combat that type of propaganda. All right, but what about George Papadopoulos? He pleaded guilty. Well, yeah, he did plead guilty, but he had just saw General Flynn's life completely destroyed. General Flynn was bankrupted, defending himself against the Mueller probe, I believe had to sell his house. And after Papadopoulos pleaded guilty, his wife came out and said that the reason he pleaded guilty was, 1, because he saw what they did to Flynn, and 2, because he was told that he was going to be charged with being an Israeli agent. Is Israel Russia? Yeah, but Papadopoulos, all right, maybe his indictment isn't anything significant, but there's Manafort, right? There's Flynn? Yeah, but what about the 13 Russians running the troll farm? Well, what about the 17 intelligence agencies? All right, you don't want to take any of that seriously? Well, now we found out today that 12 more Russians were indicted for running a spear phishing campaign to steal the DNC's emails. But wait, did the Russians get the emails through spear phishing? Which is basically you send people misleading emails, getting them to they just hand over their password to you? Or, because it couldn't be spear phishing, because James Clapper indicated to us that 17 different agencies had drawn the conclusion that Russia hacked the DNC email servers. So did they hack the servers, or was it a spear phishing campaign? There's so much inconsistency here, and there's no actual evidence. I just want to know what actually happened. That's interesting. That's interesting, isn't it? But okay, all right, let's take the probe's word for it. Let's see if any actual evidence is provided. But I am hearing people out of the deep state, people out of the mainstream media say, well, yeah, the reason that Russia hacked these emails, and they have at least admitted that none of Russia's activities actually altered votes in the voting machines, that type of thing. But the reason that Russia did this was to change public opinion, right? They released these emails to WikiLeaks, and the WikiLeaks were used to change public opinion, and that got Trump elected. So what they're saying is that if you use information at a certain time, you could sway public opinion, whether that information is true or not. You mean like conveniently handing down an indictment against 12 Russians the week before President Trump meets with Vladimir Putin with the hope of making peace between the United States and Russia? Would that sway public opinion? But of course, based on Papadopoulos, Manafort, Flynn, the troll farm, the 17 intelligence agencies, I don't think the Mueller probe has a lot of credibility. I mean, we don't know if what they're saying is true. I mean, it's possible. I mean, foreign governments, I mean, the United States is certainly guilty of it, always try to manipulate the elections of other countries. I mean, you want to talk about Israel, just look at Obama's activities in Israel. But either way, we don't know it for sure. But what we do know for sure is that however WikiLeaks got the DNC email leaks, the information within them was certainly true, because the DNC, Hillary Clinton, Podesta themselves didn't deny that it was their emails. And allegedly, well, we know because some of the emails leaked were directly from John Podesta. So was John Podesta, did he fall victim to this Russian phishing scheme? I find it interesting because he's not himself being investigated for ties to Russia, because if you look at Podesta's background and if you look up why the Podesta group actually had to shut down, you would know that Podesta did very sketchy lobbying for the State Bank of Russia. But Podesta wasn't the Trump campaign. Podesta was the chairman of the Clinton campaign. So why isn't he being indicted if this is an investigation into Russian collusion and not just a political witch hunt meant to turn public opinion against Trump and his campaign? People meddling in the election. What about Google? Because in those WikiLeaks, we found out that Google CEO Eric Schmidt was basically running the Clinton campaign digital strategy, social media strategy from 2015 on. Google changed their algorithm so that only positive news for Hillary Clinton showed up at the top of her feed. I mean, that has to affect the election, right? We found out that Facebook censored conservatives. We've had YouTube demonetizing libertarians, conservatives, anyone who is anti-establishment. Now Facebook and YouTube are spending millions of dollars for authoritative news, while at the same time they change the algorithms to limit the reach of grassroots media who generally support the populist President Donald Trump. We're just overlooking that? Because that seems like big money interference with the election. What about the other emails in the WikiLeaks? I mean, Donna Brazile has admitted she was the chairwoman of the Democratic National Convention. She was the head of the Democratic Party. And she admitted that the Democrats rigged the 2016 American presidential primary so that Hillary Clinton was anointed. She didn't actually have to run. Bernie Sanders would have defeated her if it was a fair election. That's admitted. The DNC even had the gall to argue in the DNC court case that they have every legal right to rig their primary because, well, they're a private institution. They're just a political party. They're not the government. I mean, that seems like actual evidence of people rigging the 2016 American presidential election. Why isn't Mueller looking into that? Why isn't he looking into Podesta? Why isn't he looking into the corruption we know to be true because they didn't deny it, proved in the WikiLeaks emails? All right, but if we don't want to get into WikiLeaks, I mean, right, that's not necessarily Russian collusion, other than Podesta. And what about the PP-Gate dossier? Because we found out that the Clinton campaign paid British intelligence officer Christopher Steele to fabricate a dossier which claimed that Donald Trump liked to piss on hookers in a Russian hotel. Isn't that foreign interference into our elections? And doesn't that involve Russia? In fact, didn't Russians help Christopher Steele put together the dossier? That's not pro-Donald Trump, that's against... Oh, sorry about that. That's against Donald Trump. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? And then that made-up, fabricated dossier, which was paid for by Hillary Clinton, was brought to the FISA courts and used to get the FISA courts to sign off on spying on the Trump campaign, monitoring the electrical communications of the Trump campaign. And it is interesting that James Comey, Rod Rosenstein, you know, the one who was behind this big release about the 12 Russians being indicted today, and Andrew McCabe, isn't it funny that they all signed off on the FISA warrants? So they were aware that Donald Trump and his campaign were being spied on based on a fabricated dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign with the assistance of British and Russian operatives. That seems like foreign interference. Why aren't Comey and Rosenstein being interviewed as part of the Russian probe? Oh, that's right, because they're actually the ones doing the investigation? Well, why? None of this adds up. And that the deep state, including James Clapper, denied that they were spying on Trump before we ultimately discovered that they were spying on the electrical communications of the Trump campaign. But then it got worse. We found out that a British intelligence officer was used by the American deep state to infiltrate the Trump campaign. So they weren't just spying on electrical communications. They actually had a spy infiltrate Trump's campaign. But that's fine, right? Because it's all about discovering Russian collusion. Because surely if they were monitoring the electrical communications of the Trump campaign and even had a spy embedded with the campaign, they would have more evidence than having to make up fake stories like 17 agencies have confirmed. 17 agencies have confirmed that Russia hacked the DNC email leaks. That 13 Russians have been indicted as part of a troll farm. Oh, wait, did they show up to court? Oh, Mueller, never mind, I don't have evidence. That Flynn lied about when he was questioning the Russia. Oh, he was interviewed by corrupt FBI agent Peter Strzok? Manafort was indicted. Oh, wait, that had nothing to do with Russia? Nothing to do with the Trump campaign? Oh, I mean, come on. All right, but yeah, the intelligence agencies, they might not have had access to the DNC's email servers, but CrowdStrike, they were a neutral third party, right? I mean, CrowdStrike gave the intelligence agencies their report about what they found in the DNC email servers. Oh, but CrowdStrike received $100 million from Google. And wait, we know from the WikiLeaks that Google CEO at the time, Eric Schmidt, was running Hillary Clinton's social media campaign? None of this is adding up. It's all smoke and mirrors. What should they be looking into? Well, there is Uranium-1. We do have, and by the way, you could watch my report, type in FFR News Uranium-1. We do have court-documented, FBI-documented bribes from Russia in an effort to secure 1/5 of Americans' uranium supply. People involved in Uranium-1 did donate over $150 million to the Clinton Foundation. I wonder how many people had their hands in on that $150 million as part of Uranium-1. Businessman Frank Giestra, integral in Uranium-1. I believe he donated up to $10 million to the Clinton Foundation. That part of the people, or the people who were involved in the Uranium-1 investigation, were James Comey, Robert Mueller, Rod Rosenstein, Andrew McCabe, the people that made sure that the investigation was pushed to the back burner, that the people involved were giving a slap on the wrist. They're the ones investigating Trump for Russian collusion. But Uranium-1 is Russian collusion. Why are the people who we know, we have court-documented evidence, that these people, it's so confusing. These are the people who themselves, we know, colluded with Russia to sell off 1/5 of Americans' uranium supply, yet they're the ones investigating Trump for Russia collusion and investigating the Russian government for helping to rig the 2016 American presidential election. I mean, my God, Robert Mueller, the special investigator, he's the one that dropped off the uranium to the Russians. None of this makes any sense. The 17 intelligence agencies, that was just powerful propaganda. There was nothing there. The 13 Russians indicted as part of the troll farm, powerful propaganda. There was nothing there. Flynn lied to the FBI. He was interviewed by Peter Strzok, Mr. I have an insurance plan to make sure Trump is removed from office. Paul Manafort, he laundered money through the Ukraine a decade ago. Papadopoulos pleaded guilty because he was going to be charged with being an Israeli agent. And now 12 Russians arrested for spear fishing. Yet none of John Podesta's not being investigated for his ties to Russia. No one's getting in trouble for rigging the 2016 Democratic Party primaries. Donna Brazile admitted it. We know that Hillary Clinton and the DNC rigged the 2016 American presidential election. They've admitted it. They've admitted it in a court of law. No one's investigating that. No one's investigating the people involved in the PP-Gate dossier. The Clinton campaign paid for it. James Comey signed off on it. Rod Rosenstein signed off on it. No, they're investigating Trump. Isn't that interesting? Is anyone investigating the people involved in Uranium-1? $150 million to the Clinton Foundation? Frank Giestra, Canadian businessman? Rod Rosenstein, Andrew McCabe, James Comey, Robert Mueller, all integral parts of the investigation? Is anyone investigating this? Oh no, they're the ones doing the investigation. It's amazing how powerful propaganda can be. You just make up a big lie, and then you just follow it with subsequent big lie after big lie after big lie after big lie. And then the public just believes it. If there's enough smoke there, there must be fire. Please share this link.